Okay, so now we're going to do 5.5. It's 11 o'clock. Let's keep going. And now we're going to have a lot of different transformations. Okay, so that's the secant, cosecant, tangent, cotangent. That should be able to help anybody who hasn't been able to finish their homework from last week finish their homework today. Okay. So now, whenever we have a graph, and this is talking about sinusoidal graphs. Sinusoidal graphs are sines and cosines. Those are basically sinusoidal graphs. Okay? We have A is the amplitude. We already talked about that. And we already talked about B is the period. Okay? But what we didn't talk about is when we're going to start shifting things horizontally, we need to put things into a shifted form. And basically all this is factoring the B away from the inside function. Okay? And this is called the phase shift. This is the phase shift. So if you're going to the right, you're going positive. If you're going to the left, you're going negative. And of course, D is the vertical. We already did that. So let's see how this really works. Okay. So you see, it gets more complicated. These are a little complicated now. I'm trying to see if I can do it on this page. So the first thing we want to do is, here I'm going to write it up here. So I'm going to say this is 2.5 2.5 sine of, and I'm going to put it in shifted form. I'm going to factor out the pi over 4, and I end up with t plus 3 plus 6. Okay, does everybody see that? Okay. Now I'm going to draw this box over here because I really need some space. All right. Yeah, that's t plus 3. Yeah, Louis. Okay, that's a good question. Let me just... Just trying to make the line kind of straight. Okay. T is, so this is the dependent variable. So instead of it being x, this is t, and this is y. Okay? That's all. It doesn't matter what variable you use. One's the independent variable, one's the dependent variable. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is what? What's the first thing I'm going to do? Draw a sine graph. Thank you. Okay, I'm just saying minus pi over 2. Okay, so let's see. Hold on, I'll get them getting there. Okay, so it's 0 at 0, it's 1 at pi over 2, 0 at pi, minus 1 at 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So basically, my graph looks pretty much like that, right? And so on. Okay? So this is the sine of x. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to change my period. This is pretty complicated. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my period. Okay? So my new period is what? So my old period is 2 pi. And what's my new period? What do I do to find my new period? What's B? B is pi over 4. Exactly. So this becomes 8, doesn't it? So my new period is 8. Is everybody with me? Okay, good. So that means at 2 pi, this is 8. And what I'm going to do is I'm dividing each one of my points by pi over 4, aren't I? So what does that mean? It means I'm multiplying by 4 over pi, right? So 4 over pi times this makes this 2, 4, and 6. Are we all good? Okay, good. So I handled that part. Now I'm going to do my shift. I have to do my shift. How do I shift this? I shifted 3 to the left, exactly, because plus 3 is our horizontal shift. And what that means is everything's going to shift 3 to the left. Okay? So now, here's where it gets a little more complicated. So what I would do here is I would start making, because it kind of becomes complicated to keep moving things. Okay? So let's do this. Let's say I have my x and I have my t. I'm not going to erase it, but that's t and y. Okay? So far so good. And I've got this part I can do on the graph pretty easily, right? But when I start shifting it to the left 3, that means where my graph was 0, right here, this is now minus 3, isn't it? So we have minus 3, 0 is that point. Y'all with me? So I'm just going to say minus 3 minus 3, 0, and then my point 2 becomes 2 minus 3, or minus 1, 1. My 4 becomes 1, 0. My 6, obviously if you're doing it, you don't have to do all this talking. It goes a lot faster. My 6 becomes 3 minus 1. And my 8 becomes 5, 0. Okay? So that takes care of all of this. Whoops. That takes care of all of this part of the graph right here, doesn't it? Is everybody with me before I continue? Okay, good. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply my y values by 2.5. So you can call it whatever. I'll call it y1, just because it's real hard for me to write on this board. So y1, well, this is 0. This is 2.5. This is 0. This is minus 2.5. And of course, this is still 0, right? So now I took care of that. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 6. So I'll just call this y2. I mean, probably if I was doing it on paper, I'd call y1 like y 2.5 times y, and I'd call y2 2.5 y plus 6, just so I knew what I was doing. But here's 6, 8.5. What am I doing? 6. So minus 6 minus 2.5 is 3.5 and 6. And so these are the points, thank you. These are the points I'm going to graph. I'm going to graph an ordered pair like that into Alex. I think we should probably do an Alex problem. You want to do one right into Alex? Here, let me open up Alex here. I think that would probably be helpful. Yes, yes. It kind of just depends on what you feel comfortable. This is a very difficult, honestly, this is very difficult to teach. So I'm trying to show you what I do step by step. And a lot of times what I do when I graph is I just change all the points on the axis. But what will happen is I'll have a jumbled mess for you. So I'm trying to, yeah, so the y2 is the part, so this is the y1. It takes the original, and this is the y2. It adds the 6. Yes. So what should y1 or x equal to be? That is negative 2.5. That's a negative there. Negative 2.5. Yeah. The table keeps it clean. What's going to happen is this can get very complicated. Yeah. So let me get a problem up here with Alex. Hold on. I don't like to do the table for everything. For the easy ones, I don't do a table. But when things get really complicated, honestly, I very rarely do a table, to tell you the truth. but I can't necessarily show you very easily how to do it without a table. So I think the table keeps everything a little more understandable, I believe. Hold on one sec. Let me... Yes, let me do this. I'm getting Alex up, by the way. I'm not ignoring you guys. Do y'all want to take like a 10-minute break, or you want to keep going right now? Is anybody overwhelmed? Yeah.